Thank you, members. Thank you. Now, can I just make the formal part of the meeting just to advise you, this is a multi-locational meeting which has been held in the council chamber at Penalta House and via Microsoft Teams. This meeting will be recorded and will be made available to view via the council's website, except for discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images and audio of those individuals present and or speaking at Planning Committee will be publicly available to all via the recording on the council's website. Please can I remind all members joining remotely to leave their cameras on during the meeting and to use the hands up function on Teams when you wish to speak. For those members joining in the council chamber, please also use the hands up function on Teams and turn on the chamber microphone when you wish to speak. Votes for this meeting will be taken via Microsoft Forms. When a vote is required, the form will appear on your screen and the members will be asked to click on yes, no, or abstain, and then click on submit vote. Please can I remind members that if you lose connection during the meeting, please make every attempt to reconnect. However, the meeting will continue as long as it remains quorate. Committee services are on hand and will be able to assist you to reconnect if necessary. I'll now start off with a roll call. Can I call out members' names? Councillor Adams.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Aldworth.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Angel. Councillor Chapman.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Dix. Councillor Dix. No. Councillor Eade. Councillor Fussell.
I'm up.
Thank you. Councillor Hussey.
Present.
Councillor Amanda McConnell.
Present.
Councillor Powell.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Simmons.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Taylor. Councillor Williams.
Present.
Councillor Whitcomb. And Councillor Woodland.
Present, Chair.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Quorate. Okay, we are quorate. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is to, sorry? Yes. Yes, I've got it here. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Angel. Yes, we've already received an apology for absence from Councillor Whitcomb. Any other apologies that members are aware of? No? If members are aware later, please contact committee services to notify them. Okay, agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. Councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal or prejudicial interest in any item of business on the agenda in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. Are there any declarations? Councillor Julian Simmons, I see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's item 5, which is 23/0229 full, 10 Newton Industrial Estate here in Cross Keys. I have to declare an interest as I have a predetermined view. Okay. But I will leave after number 4. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank
Okay,
you.
that's
Councillor
accepted.
Simmons.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor
you.
Simmons.
Thank you.
Now we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 9th of July, pages 1 to page 13 of your pack. I'll go through them one page at a time for accuracy. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, and page 13. And begin to think that I'm glad I wasn't there. Can somebody move those for accuracy, please?
Can I move, Chair?
And thank you, Councillor Aldworth. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Can we have the voting slip, please? I will abstain on this, obviously, because I wasn't present. Okay.
Yes, Chair, the minutes have been approved.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we move on to agenda item 4, which is application number 25/0366 RET, which is 4 Heel UCAF Hengoed CF 82 7NU. The case officer is Emil Braithwaite. Emil, could you make the presentation, please?
Good evening. This application is for the retention and completion of a driveway at number 4 Heel Ucav. Here's an aerial photograph. To the right of the image, you can see the post-war development of which the site is part of. There's quite a clear character for these properties by the way they're set up and away from the road. And they have sloping raised gardens to the front and long gardens to the rear. Off-street parking within the area typically consists of hard standing or garages to the rear of the properties. If you can see my cursor, there are a few here, garages and hard standing. In this instance, the application proposes to excavate the front garden and erect a 1.7 metre high breeze block retaining wall. It should be noted there were no elevation drawings or structural calculations with this submission. So this is the application site as it is currently. And this is the application site prior to the development. You can see from these images, there's quite a clear and distinct character along this street scene. As mentioned, the properties have sloping raised front gardens and amenity spaces with some soft and hard landscaping and primarily concrete retaining walls following the line of the pavement. In contrast, the works would see the loss of these typical features that predominate along the street and would result in a development that is out of keeping with the character and appearance of the area, which is contrary to policy SP6 of our LDP. It should be noted that there are no other examples in the street scene where the front garden has been excavated for the purposes of off-street parking, similar to the proposed development. The off-street parking at number 12 is noted. However, it's considered that the circumstance is materially different to that proposed. In this instance, the off-street parking is to the side of the dwelling on the corner of the street, where ground levels are relatively flat in comparison with the application site, and no excavation of the front garden was required. And so I think that this can't be used as a precedent for the development of the application site. I think finally, it's worth noting that whilst each application should be considered on its own merits, given the lack of similar work within the street scene, should this application be approved, it would be difficult for the local planning authority to resist similar development. And I believe this would have an adverse cumulative impact on the character of the area, should everyone start doing the same thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Braithwaite. Now we have two speakers. We have Mr. Price, who is the applicant, and also Councillor Donna Cushion. Can I remind each of you in turn that you're allowed 5 minutes. I've got a stopwatch here, okay, very efficient system. And I'll remind you of about 15 seconds before your time is up so that you have to wind up. As usual, it doesn't usually take people that long to make their presentation. So could we start off, Mr. Price, with you, and if you could make a presentation, please.
Yes, okay. Thank you all for being here. I've been at the property now for 42 years. When we first moved into the house, the street had less than probably 5 cars. About 20 years ago, I approached the council to have a drive. There was no problem with that at the time, and they asked me to pay first to put a drop curb there. So I paid the council, I think it was just under £300. They put the drop curb in. I had nothing to do with that. And from that time on, our circumstances changed. We never had the money then to go ahead and do the drive. But now we've managed to save some money. My wife's health has deteriorated, and parking in the street is an absolute nightmare. You know, the neighbours have been at each other's throats. Really difficult to park there. Anyway, I didn't think anything else had changed regarding me contacting the council because they were fine with it. They put the drop curb in. So my background is in building, landscaping. I've been bricklaying in the college, and I thought, well, I'll do it myself rather than pay for it to be done. So I hired a digger, dug it all out, started the building work, and then the council got in touch with me to say that we might have to put it all back. Now, at the moment, I'm £5,000 into this build, and to put it all back would just be, we haven't got the money to do that anyway. So where we are at the moment now is my wife's got multiple illnesses. Very often we've got to park outside of the street. Let me just get my notes up here a second. And then I had a further correspondence with the council asking me to get a structural engineer, which we have. We've had an inspection and a report from John Payne, CDS Services. And we desperately need, you know, easier parking in the street, because on times there's as much as 25, 30 cars in the street today. So I would just say if we are refused, it's going to be a long time before we can put the ground back as it was. We've got about £1,000 left to finish the job that we want. I think that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Price. Can we now then move on to Councillor Cushin? You can start whenever you wish, Councillor. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to ask if everybody received my email this morning with the publisher document. I know a lot of the pictures came up on the presentation by the planning officer, but I'd like to thank you, Chair, members of the committee, for allowing me to speak here today in favour of Mr. and Mrs. Price's planning application. Firstly, I know they both like to offer their apologies. I were unaware the planning permission would be required to have the drive installed, as they'd been previously given 20 years previously. Mr. and Mrs. Price have lived in Helachaff for 42 years, and I think when the architects envisioned the building of these houses, they probably hadn't foreseen parking and social problems their homes would cause. Just to give you some background, Mr. Price is a qualified landscaper, and Mrs. Price is disabled and has progressively degenerative medical conditions. Helachaff is notoriously difficult to park in. On occasions, Mr. Price has had to park in the street, into the next street, making it very difficult for Mrs. Price to get home. Hence the reason Mr. and Mrs. Price decided to have the drive built in the front garden. There are 5 hard-standing garages leading from Helachaff onto the gardens of the houses below Hilderu. The planning officer is recommending that planning permission is refused based on reasons contained in his report. However, might I add there is no specific distinctiveness as specified in his report. There are a number of properties who use different materials for their front walls. In fact, number 11 and 12 of Helachaff does not comply with said distinctiveness, and as can be seen in my distributed information to yourselves. I'm aware the discussion around a disabled parking spot has been discussed. However, there are a number of blue badge holders in the street. Therefore, the spot would not be exclusive to the use of Mrs. Price. I hope that you will give permission for the planning application to be granted, and I'd like to thank you, members, for allowing me to speak today.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Cushin. Right, members, it's now open to debate. Are there any questions from members relative to this application? Councillor Dix, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor
So I was
Dix.
a bit late today. They're trying to get the problem trying to get access to the computer this afternoon.
Yeah. Can I just, before you start, Councillor Dix, I didn't mark you as present. Have you been here for the whole of the presentation?
Yes, I have. I've listened to the whole of the presentation. I just came in just after the item 4, I think it was.
Okay, That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I think that in this case we should allow the residents to have their parking bay. I think that we're all familiar with the way the streets are currently, more and more cars, and it's very difficult to have access to your property, especially if you're elderly and you need that access on site where you live. And I think that the resident is explaining the situation adequately to us all, really. And I think that we should just show a bit of compassion here, not leave this resident in financial hardship, being forced to put it back, etc. So I would support that. I would advocate that we allow this application to go through. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Dix. Councillor Shane Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not sure I agree with Councillor Dix. I think the point, looking at the pictures, if every homeowner decided to do this, then I would totally undermine the nature of that particular street. We all know parking is an issue, but it's an issue right throughout this borough and further than that. And as much as I sympathise with the claim for the parking, I think the nature of this it doesn't really warrant that. The question I've got though, it was reference to a drop curb, and I could see that in the pictures. That might have been done some time ago. But if planning was allowed 20 years ago, that wouldn't be. It wouldn't necessarily be valid now. So whenever the drop curb was put in, that doesn't mean to say it's valid for. I think I'm right in saying that, aren't I?
Yeah, Councillor Thomas, you want?
Yeah,
sorry,
you come back.
Thomas, sorry.
It doesn't appear to be any planning history relating to the site. So there's often two requirements when you create an access. One is a drop curb, and that's agreement of the Highway Authority to put the drop curb in. Then you may require planning permission for the driveway. So the engineering works associated with creating the driveway. So I suspect that consent may have been given previously for the drop curb by Highways, but it doesn't appear the planning permission was granted. If indeed it was, it wouldn't be relevant today, obviously, because that time expired and not been implemented. And we must consider circumstances prevailing today in terms of policy and kind of provisions.
Thank you.
Two separate entities.
Yeah, thank you very much for that clarity. And I just want to point out, looking at the one slide that shows the dugout area, I suppose, going back to what was said, if the neighbour wanted to do exactly the same, then we're completely changing the nature of the street and everything else. So, as I say, I don't particularly agree with Councillor Dix. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Mansell-Powell.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I put my hand up. Councillor Williams asked a similar question to me. It's about the drop curb. If the planning permission had been in place before, obviously I think we did a different place. Just to follow up on something Ryan said, although there's no evidence of the planning application going in the past, could it have been put in and there's just no documentation held, being the time scale on it? That was all. Because it does seem to me the drop curve to me would imply the plan, that it would have been arranged or allowed. So no, to suddenly start and I want to say no, now you can't do it, the drop curve in. It is a bit of a mix and a match for me, to be honest. Though I'm caught in the middle with this one. We only want to know, was there a chance that plan had been put in? There's just no records of it.
These are the ones to come in as well. Do you want to come back in, Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, we've got records going back to the start of the planning system in the 40s. So we have historic records relating to planning applications. Our records don't indicate there was a planning permission granted. But I see Lisa Cooper.
Yeah,
sorry,
Lisa's on. Yes, Lisa, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, I noticed as well. Obviously, there was a drop crossing in situ, and I'm looking at Google Street View. I guess the applicant said it's been there since January 2010 at least, so it's been there for 15 years at least. The problem might have been, obviously, when I'm looking at these, with my sort of background, I would look at that site and think, yeah, that in itself, even though it's not on a distributor road, the principle of creating access there, given the structural implications would require planning permission. I'm guessing, and I can't say because I wasn't in this role 20 years ago, but the applicant might have approached highways operations directly, and they might not have realised that works of that nature would have required planning permission. You know, they're very good at flagging up if somebody wants to drop crossing onto a distributor road, and they will refer it to me. But not always sort of on sort of council estates such as this, even if there are structural elements involved. So I can only guess that operations sort of respected that request at the time, came along and dropped a crossing. Can't say at the time whether they consulted Highways Development Control for advice. Obviously, I wasn't doing that role then. But that kind of unravels it for me, because I did wonder, looking at it, why is there a drop crossing there? So that kind of explains it for me as well. And from our perspective, you know, from a highway safety perspective, we didn't raise an objection to this, you know, because it would be creating off-street parking at the end of the day. But yeah, that's sort of unraveling the history of it, really. Whether highways operations at the time realised that the works themselves would have required planning, probably not, because that does sometimes happen. Yeah, that's probably my best guess at what happened there. Because as Ryan said, we've had no previous planning applications for a driveway there.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. I've got Councillor Woodland and Councillor Dix. I realise you got your hand up before, Councillor Dix, but I'll call you in afterwards. Councillor Woodland, Christian Woodland first, please.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I put my hand down and put it back up. So, yeah, sorry for the confusion. Yeah, I just wanted to really ask if there's any sort of structural issues that might be in the groundwork below at all that might be an issue.
Come back in, Mr. Thomas.
I think the Highway Authority comments have asked for structural calculations. I also understand that housing operations have asked for structural calculations. I don't think they'd be submitted as part of the application, but I guess a well-designed structure may well be acceptable in terms of from a construction perspective. But we don't have those details. There would be a condition recommended by Highways to ensure that it's built correctly to protect, obviously, the dwellings behind and the integrity of the highway itself.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thomas. Councillor Dix.
Yeah, where I live in Montclair Avenue, there's a lot of OAP bungalows and former council properties. I'm just thinking now that there's a number of them have had drives done in the last 2 years. I don't think any of them got any planning permission for it. There was a load of people going down knocking doors and said, "You want your front garden turned into a driveway, block paving?" And there was dozens of them going out, dozens of them. I'm not aware of any planning application that was put in to authorise those works. Not that I want the council to start ripping out people's driveways, but if we could have some consistency, because if it's very confusing to the public if you've got to have planning permission or not, because I'm aware of like I said, of the driveways have been put in, and I'm not aware of any planning permission going in. I think we need. I think we need to work with the applicant here to resolve the issues to get this passed.
Yeah, well, I think we'll get clarity here about that from Mr. Thomas. Councillor Dix.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. There is inconsistency, I guess, from the perception of the public, because there are different regulations for different locations. So access onto certain classifications of road would require planning permission, and others do not. But if there are, as in this case, quite significant engineering operations associated with the development, then they will require planning permission, because those in their own right require planning permission. So it depends on the circumstances. I think that, there can be a perception that there are inconsistencies, but it's based upon sound legal provisions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thomas. We've now got Councillor Amanda McConnell, and then I believe Mansell Powell wants to come in, and then Councillor Woodland as well. So we'll give you a second round after Councillor McConnell. Councillor McConnell.
Thank you, Chair. I've noticed there's a bit of a precedent with garages and parking at the back of properties. I'm just wondering whether the applicant did actually consider doing that instead.
Well, the application before us is for the front, and we're judging it on the application at the front. But is there any comment that the officer would like to make about that?
I'm not aware of any previous approaches that Pastor Emil can.
No. Emil?
No, there are no other applications for something to the rear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So we got no information relative to that. Is that the total comment at the moment, Councillor McConnell?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. No, it's Councillor Mansell Powell and then Councillor Christian Woodland again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was only to follow up. I did want to follow up on the answer to the earlier question. It's just a little bit untidy for me. You know, the drop curb implies you're gonna get the drive in. So, you know, you've been asking now the resident to take the big cost of putting it all back. Have we refused any other drives in that street, or is this the first? That was the other question I wanted to add on. I just think, obviously, with the drop curve being put in, you know, you would think then, yeah, okay, the drive should be no issue. So I feel sorry for the resident in this instance for being caught in the middle, really, like, you know. It's a bit disjointed from a council perspective, it is.
Yeah, well, the application, as I said, was put in some time ago, and officers have explained that situation already. I'm sure, as you said, I mean, with the tremendous amount of sympathy for the applicant, but we have to judge it on his planning merits, and that's what we're dealing with here. I think you've already had an answer to that statement, Councillor Powell. Councillor Christian Woodland?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mansell have more or less asked what I was going to say, so thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Well, members, there's no further indication. With the officer's recommendation is for refusal. Does anybody wish to put that forward, or do they wish to put an alternative?
I'll move that, Chair. I'll
You
move the officer's recommendation.
Is that seconded? Do I hear anybody seconding it? No, then I'll second it. So we have something on the floor to vote against. So it's a for or against, really. So the recommendation is for refusal. Can we have the voting slip up, please? So it's for, against, or abstain. Okay. So it's the application is recommended for refusal. That's for. Against is for approval.
The votes have been cast, Chair, and the officer's recommendation has been carried.
Okay, thank you for that. The applicant has the opportunity to appeal.
Appeal, certainly, yes.
Yeah, the applicant can appeal. Obviously, it's a sad situation, but planning is planning. Okay. Yeah, okay, thank you. You're entitled to leave now if you wish, Councillor. And now we'll move on to the second application, which is, excuse me while I find my notes. It's application number 23/0229, and it's a full application. It's on Unit 10, Newton Industrial Estate, Cross Keys, Newport. And the case officer is Anthony Pine. Anthony, can we have the presentation on this one, please?
Chair, I just see Councillor Simmons' hand.
Oh, sorry,
but...
Julian Simmons, yes. Just before you start, yes, Councillor Simmons, you're going to leave the chamber?
I am. I was just going to mention that.
All right, you're going to switch off. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, thanks very much indeed. Take care all. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Good night. Sorry about that. Okay, thank you, Anthony. Could you start your presentation?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. This application seeks planning permission to demolish an existing industrial building and construct a residential development of 28 units on the site. I will go through the officer presentation to explain the proposal in greater detail to members. So the site is sort of broadly broadly triangular, slightly curtailed at the southeastern edge. You can see my hand, virtual hand, just going round now. The site is within the defined settlement boundary. That's the sort of light brown line you can see there. It's within the defined settlement boundary and part of the Newtown Industrial Estate, which is designated under the local development plan, specifically policies EM2 and CW13, as a secondary employment site. As detailed in the committee report, the Planning Policy Officer has considered the use of the site for employment purposes against the marketing carried out by the applicant and the site's poor prospects for reoccupation by its identified use, as well as the need to consider housing land supply. It has been concluded that the principle of the use of the site for residential purposes has been justified in this instance and would contribute to total housing requirements and affordable housing target policies within the adopted plan. So in terms of the context of the site fronts broadly northeastwards onto Tredegar Terrace, which has the industrial estate road and then a small verge and small service lane, beyond which are mainly terrace properties of Tredegar Terrace. To the southeast is a commercial use, transport sweeper business, I believe. To the rear of the site, which is the south, is the Sahawi River, and then beyond that, the A467. To the west is an area of woodland with another part of the industrial estate road beyond, and at a distance of approximately 50 metres from the site boundary is further industrial land, part of the industrial estate. This is the existing site plan. The site is largely formed of an existing building, which I've got photographs up, which we'll come on to later. And then the site has revegetated, which you'll be able to see in photographs. This is the proposed site plan for the residential development. The layout has been subject to significant negotiation with the applicant, which has resulted in improvements to the layout. These include fronting properties onto Tredegar Terrace. Initially, there were high rear boundaries proposed adjacent to the road. So that's been amended to provide active frontage and natural surveillance from these properties which face onto the road. Within the site now, subject to the amendments during the discussions, the end of the main estate road run has properties addressing the road and terminating the view in accordance with good placemaking principles. The development is mainly comprised of 3-bedroom properties, but to address the requirements of the Affordable Housing Officer, the layout has been amended to incorporate a bungalow and one pair of 1-bedroom apartments. And there's a local area for play also included in the layout. Coming up are the various house types on the development. These will be finished in face brickwork and stone cladding with synthetic slate roofs. Coming up before you now is some site photographs. It's pretty clear to see at present the site is dominated by the existing industrial unit, which, as you can see, is in a significantly dilapidated state. This just swings round, so you start to see the relationship with Tredegar Terrace. The properties, there is actually a small service road, which I think is picked up on the last slide. But there's significant separation distance, certainly front to front, comparative to the terrace relationship behind, in the streets behind, where properties front each other at far closer distances than will be achieved in this proposed layout. This is just showing some more views of the site. You can see the state of the land, vegetated. This is the rear of the building with a connecting sort of parts of the building along with the vegetation. The proposed layout is considered to achieve a satisfactory level of separation from existing properties and between the new dwellings. The Environmental Health Officer has considered the site's location and, subject to mitigation to be confirmed in a follow-up report required under planning condition, sufficient mitigation is envisaged to be achieved, potentially including improved glazing, and the Environmental Health Officer has raised no objection to the development. To the rear of the site is the Sahawi River. The site would be on the right-hand side there. It is at a significantly lower level. Natural Resources Wales were consulted on the application in terms of flood risk and have considered the submitted flood consequence assessment and offer no objection to the development. The layout includes significant planting. The majority of the trees on site have been classified as U, with several other trees of a higher category B, I believe. There is proposed extensive planting to be confirmed under planning condition, but in the region of sort of 45 trees to be planted on site, and this is considered on balance acceptable. One thing to draw to members' attention, as detailed in the officer report, there is a right-of-way shown on the council's definitive map. That isn't, it's broadly, if you can see my cursor, running into the site, but terminating within the site on the definitive map. In actual fact, on the ground, this isn't shown to be visible or usable. There's a chain link fence across the front of the site. Discussions with the rights of way officer, this may have been a historic right of way that was severed by the dual carriageway and is almost a sort of legacy of being left on the definitive map. However, it is still a material consideration in this planning application. The rights of way officer has considered the circumstances and, subject to the applicant being made aware through the informatives proposed in the officer report of the need for them to address the right of way, potentially by extinguishing it or diverting it under separate parts of the Town and Country Planning Act, that they've raised, the public rights of way officer raised no objection to the application, subject to this being brought to the developer's attention. 3 representations have been received in respect to the application. These are detailed in the officer report, but primarily relate to concerns over the impact of the new development on the ability of surrounding industrial sites to operate, the need for the development to consider existing residents, and the impact on ecological matters such as the river, flora and fauna. In respect to the surrounding industrial land, it's noted that the Environmental Health Officer has considered the noise impacts and that with mitigation is satisfied that these can be addressed. It's also worth noting there is already a close relationship between parts of the industrial estate and existing dwellings. And on balance, it's not considered that the development would be likely to prejudice surrounding land for its allocated use. In terms of the need for the development to consider existing residents, the design of the development is considered to have an acceptable impact on surrounding residents with sufficient separation distance. It's actually achieving close to or on 21 metres between the front elevations of properties, and that 21 metre rule is normally only applied in a back-to-back situation. So the layout with new dwellings and their relationship with the existing properties is considered acceptable, and within the site it's considered that there's sufficient separation and angles to avoid any unacceptable impacts. And that goes in terms of noise, amenity or privacy. There's sufficient parking and an acceptable highway layout. The highways authorities have raised no objection to avoid any unacceptable highway impacts. So it's considered the development accords with policy CW3. In terms of ecological impacts, Natural Resources Wales and the Council's ecologists have considered the development and raised no objections. There are planning conditions attached to the permission requiring details such as construction environmental management plans, landscape and ecological management plans, a biodiversity strategy, lighting strategy, and, as I've said, detailed landscaping will be required by condition. And this is considered to have sufficient mitigation on the river and flora and fauna. So the application is recommended for approval, Chair, subject to the applicant entering into a legal agreement to provide the affordable housing provision required. And following completion of the legal agreement, it's recommended that the application will be approved subject to the conditions detailed in the officer report, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Pine. Members, it's open for discussion now. If members wish to ask any questions, Councillor Shane Williams.
Just one question for me, Chair. I know you referenced National Resources Wales and the close proximity to the river. Is it a history of that area flooding? I know that the rugby field, which is not quite by there, but not a million miles away. So I'm just wondering what the history of the flooding is in that particular location and whether that might be relevant.
I believe, because obviously we've had an update to technical advice note 15, so there has been sort of new flood mapping coming in. I think at times the site has been sort of included within the general flood risk area. However, as you noted, it's a significantly lower level. The applicant has submitted a flood consequence assessment, and Natural Resources Wales have raised no objection. And in certain circumstances, they require a finished floor level on the dwellings on certain sites where it's close to being, without that mitigation, it would potentially flood. They haven't requested that in this instance, so they're satisfied that the existing land level is not liable to flood.
Looking at the site as well, Mr. Pine, it does look as if this site is elevated. It's higher than the.
It is significantly, yes, and I believe there's a defensive bund that has been created over time between the river and the site. So yeah. I think it's now in a defended zone under the latest mapping that is detailed in the report. Okay.
Okay. Are there any further questions, members? There's no indication. So the officer's report is recommended that the application is deferred for the applicant to enter into legal agreement to provide the affordable housing provision as detailed in the report, and once agreed that B, permission be granted subject to the conditions contained in the officer's report, and should the legal agreement not be completed within 3 months of the date of this decision, that delegated powers be granted to the planning services manager to refuse planning permission on grounds of lack of affordable housing provision. That's the recommendation. Will somebody move that? Yes, move, Councillor Angel, thank you. Seconded by anyone?
Second, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. It's been moved and seconded. So can we have the voting slip then, please? Voting slip is there for, against, or abstain, and submit. That looks good.
Yeah.
Unanimously, is it?
Yes.
That's unanimously voted, and that brings us to the end of the agenda. Thank you, members, for your attendance, and I wish everyone a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Chair. Good night, all.
Night all.